Hello again, Steve here with a few words that just came to mind recently to do with honesty as being refreshing. You know, I'm sure you run across the same thing too once in a while, that sometimes it gets a little overwhelming, a little bit boring almost to read or listen to stuff that we feel is BS. I mean, we feel it on two ways. One way it actually is, and the other way, the one who's telling it probably deep down inside knows it's BS. So there's one thing to, recognize somebody who's honestly coming from the heart and they believe something to be true. Somehow their warped sense of logic or their missing sort of key points results in nonsense. But nevertheless, at least we can give that individual credit for really believing it and really going forward with it. This is why I admire certain religious people and so on, because they're coming from the heart, and you can actually see it in their actions. They're nice people, they're good people, they're helpful people and so on, even though a lot of their beliefs seem like rubbish. So that's to be commended, I think, that part of it, the real, genuine, willing to act on beliefs. Now, one of the things I notice is that I don't read a lot, for one thing, but when I do, I like to try to get into something that's a little bit deep, because a deep and an honest reflection. I like certain philosophy and certain science and certain logical process, or even spiritual text that's coming, explanation of something from the heart. And I'm reading a little bit about Nietzsche here, Friedrich Nietzsche. And he talks. It's very difficult for me to read it because it's so dense. It's quite slow, and trying to follow his thoughts. Because sometimes he's talking about it coming from his heart. Other times he's just reflecting on what somebody else said. So it's really quite rich. But a philosopher like Nietzsche leaves no stone unturned. It's everything is up for observation and certainly skepticism at first, which once again is refreshing, because it's somebody who's living his life as honest as he can. He's not going to take anything at face value. He's going to look at it, right? And the way we hear all the time, so we have rights. I have the right to do this and so on. And Nietzsche at one point in his book, he makes the point that philosophy is without rights, because from a philosophical or even a scientific approach to life, you cannot start off with something is, well, maybe it is. Let's examine it. Let's let it stand up on our examination and see if it is. So the same goes for rights. Nietzsche is the kind of guy who won't make an assertion that we have rights, because that wouldn't be philosophy if it was just a statement like that. And it's interesting to look at that too, I think, because if we had the right to life, then why would somebody be able to kill us? So a lot of these things, when we start to question it, don't make much sense. If we have property rights, how is it that somebody can tax the property or take the property or seize the property or confiscate it? They wouldn't be able to do that if we had rights, if we actually had rights. We can say we do, but it doesn't seem to stand up to critical examination. And perhaps Nietzsche's right in that respect. But that was a little diversion. But my point being that it's very refreshing, I find, to read something that's from somebody's heart. And especially if it's somehow I can follow it through a logical process, which some of this is a challenge, but nevertheless it is. And I don't agree with it all, mind you. But when I can see that somebody's making a good effort to explain something or talk about something that's deeper than just pedantics or superficiality or fantasy or whatever. And some of those things do have their place, of course. In fact, they all do, probably, especially in making a point or telling a story and this sort of thing. But when it's an exploration, a process of exploration, a lot of that extra stuff doesn't belong. It has to do with questioning and trying to then get to those answers. That, to me, is the refreshingness of honesty. And I really admire those who do, and it affects my quality of life in a positive way, because it helps me to try to be the same. It's like looking at somebody who's living in a way that I would like to live, acting in a way that I would want to act. It's just like anything else. If we hang out with a bunch of people who behave in a certain way, or we associate mentally through the works of others who live in a certain way, some of that's going to rub off on us. And to me, intellectual honesty and heartfelt honesty and so on promotes a better quality of life. So, and maybe there's a point to it too, what Socrates said. I didn't realize it was Socrates before, but he quoted him in there. Reason equals virtue equals happiness. Whether that's an exact corollary or it's just set out to make a point, that happiness being a quality of life in that statement is the end product. It's a side benefit. It's a result of having lived a life in a certain way. So, if quality of life is important, I think it behooves us to observe how we live and probably be as honest as we can with ourselves first, and honest with others later, which is a natural outflow, I think. Great chatting again. Steve here. I'll sign off for now. Talk again soon.